They told you you're free. You live in a democracy. You can vote, switch careers, speak up, move cities, start over. You can build a life, shape your identity, chase your dreams. You're told that choice equals freedom, and so you believe it. But deep down you feel it, don't you? That quiet, persistent fear. The fear of saying the wrong thing. The fear of stepping out of line. The fear of being misunderstood, misjudged, canceled, replaced. You fear losing your place, your title, your dignity, not by force, but by shame. You fear failure, not because you'll fall, but because someone will see you fall. And that's the paradox. You're free, but terrified. Look closer. That's not freedom. That's psychological conditioning. You've been trained, rewarded for compliance, punished for deviation, praised for staying inside the lines. Lou, you've been fed choices curated by others, taught to express yourself within acceptable limits, and warned, always warned, of the invisible consequences if you don't. The leash isn't around your neck, it's in your mind. Invisible, flexible, democratic. The perfect modern control system. One where the prisoner defends the prison and the guard is no longer needed. You see, real control today doesn't look like bars or chains. It's more elegant than that. It's the illusion of choice. It's the belief that because you can pick from column A or column B, you're free, never realizing that both columns were written by the same hand. You're managed, not by force, but by narrative. You obey not because you're forced to, but because you believe you should. Because you've been taught that disobedience is dangerous. That questioning is selfish, that stepping outside the frame makes you the problem. And the most brilliant part, you're the one holding the cage shut. You censor yourself. You manage your tone, your words, your ideas. Not because someone told you to, but because somewhere along the way, you learned what happens to people who don't. You learn to shrink in meetings, to polish your opinions, to smile when you're uneasy, to say yes when everything in you screams no, all in the name of being reasonable, professional, nice. This isn't freedom. This is performance. Obedience wrapped in autonomy. A leash disguised as liberty. Welcome to the modern cage. One that doesn't need bars because it already lives in your head. One that lets you walk anywhere, as long as you never try to leave. They didn't need to take your freedom. They just had to redefine it. They replaced the old chains with new narratives, the whip with shame, the prison walls with social norms. And they told you this was progress, that this was maturity, that this was you growing up. But tell me, if you're constantly afraid of being wrong, of being judged, of being left behind, are you free? Or are you just another well-trained subject in a system that doesn't need to scream to control you? Because now you whisper to yourself? You don't live in an open society. You live in an open-air simulation. Invisible rules, silent punishments, and psychological warfare disguised as civilization. And the greatest trick of all? You thank them for it. Welcome to freedom, the most effective leash ever invented. You see, once you understand that freedom today is a performance, not a principle, you have to ask, how did we get here? How did we go from revolutions for liberty to a society where people censor themselves in the name of civility? The answer lies in a playbook older than most nations, written not with emotion but precision. Machiavelli, the architect of power, stripped of its morality. He didn't ask what was right. He asked what worked. Power to him wasn't a noble responsibility. It was an engineering problem, and the solution? Control perception, control emotion, control fear. Machiavelli understood something rulers today still use. People don't need to love their rulers. They just need to fear the alternative. When the system shakes, when faith in authority begins to crack, don't apologize, don't explain. Find a villain, find someone to blame, someone to point to, someone to hate, and suddenly the people forget who's holding the leash because they're too busy chasing a phantom. If the people lose faith, Machiavelli wrote, give them a common enemy, and just like that, power is restored. It doesn't matter who the enemy is. It only matters that they exist. The immigrants are stealing your jobs. The wealthy are rigging the system. The poor are draining your taxes. The radicals are corrupting your children. The outsiders are polluting our values. One day it's the left, another day it's the right. One generation blames the youth, the next, the elders. The goal isn't truth, the goal is direction, and fear needs a direction. Because when people are scared and divided, they become manageable. When people are suspicious of each other, they run toward safety, even if that safety is a tighter leash. That's the genius. The more chaos you feel, the more obedience you accept. And suddenly submission feels like strength. Compliance feels like protection. Censorship becomes virtue, and control becomes comfort. This isn't new, it's timeless. When the Roman Empire declined, they blamed the Christians. When Europe fractured, they blamed the Jews. When modern economies falter, they blame the other, whoever fits the moment. Power doesn't need a solution, it needs a story that tells the people who to fear and why obedience is their only hope. So the modern state doesn't beg for your loyalty, it manufactures your panic. It feeds you headlines soaked in outrage, algorithms tuned to conflict, narratives sharpened like weapons, and then it offers a cure: more control, more surveillance, more safety from the enemy they created, and you welcome it. You post your loyalty, you share the slogans, you rally behind flags and causes and faces on screens. Not because you're free, but because you're afraid, because you're exhausted, because you're convinced that this time it's different, that this time submission is survival, and you never stop to ask, who benefits when I'm afraid? This is not a glitch. This is the blueprint. Machiavelli laid it out centuries ago, and the architects of modern power never stopped building. The cage isn't just mental, it's strategic. A design so effective it doesn't just imprison you, it makes you defend the prison. And once you internalize that strategy, you begin to see the pattern: fear, division, obedience, repeat. They don't need to take your freedom. They just need to give you someone to hate and let you hand it over yourself. The most dangerous form of control isn't the kind that chains your body. It's the kind that rewires your mind. And in the name of freedom, entire populations have been conditioned to accept surveillance, obedience, and division, all while believing they are still in control. Let's begin with the United States after 9/11. When the Twin Towers collapsed, so did the public's resistance to state power. A wave of fear swept across the nation, and in that fear, power made its move. The government passed the Patriot Act, an unprecedented expansion of surveillance authority. Overnight, the Fourth Amendment was quietly diluted. Millions of Americans had their phone calls, emails, and internet activity monitored, without warrants, without court orders, without even knowing. And then came Guantanamo Bay, a black site that existed outside the rules of law. Detainees were held for years without trial, without legal representation, without hope. Torture was rebranded as enhanced interrogation. Justice was suspended indefinitely, and all of this was done under the banner of protection. Freedom must be defended. But what kind of freedom demands secret prisons? Who is being defended and who is being watched? Now fast forward to the COVID-19 pandemic, a very different kind of threat, but one that followed the same logic. The fear of an invisible virus became the lever to shut down entire societies. Businesses were ordered to close. Families were separated. Cities turned into ghost towns. And those who questioned the measures were labeled irresponsible, dangerous, even enemies of public health. People weren't just isolated physically, they were divided psychologically. You were either obedient or reckless. The compliant became moral. The skeptics became outcasts. It didn't matter whether your questions were about science, policy, or basic rights. If you challenged the narrative, you were the problem. And behind the masks and lockdowns, another silent machine roared to life: surveillance infrastructure. Governments and private corporations began collecting behavioral data at a scale never before imagined. Health apps, contact tracing, location tracking, biometric IDs. The crisis became the excuse for an entirely new normal, one where personal privacy was optional and state oversight was permanent. But this tactic isn't uniquely Western, it's global. In Russia, the enemy is NATO. State media repeats a single story: the West threatens our way of life. We must unite to defend ourselves. Fear binds the people to their leaders. Dissent becomes treason, and every restriction is painted as a shield. In China, the narrative is about cultural survival. The West is depicted as manipulative, trying to erode Chinese values and traditions. To resist, citizens are urged to stay vigilant against outside influence, against internal weakness. Online speech is tightly policed. Foreign media is blocked. Social credit systems reward compliance and punish deviation. The people aren't just ruled, they're molded. Each system has its own enemy, its own story of fear, and its own justification for control. The brilliance of this strategy is that it doesn't require chains, just belief. Belief in the threat, belief in the savior, belief that sacrificing your rights is not just necessary, but noble. Because when fear becomes the fuel of politics, and freedom is the word that hides the leash, the most effective prison is the one you can't see, because you've been told it's there to protect you. In the past, slavery was easy to spot. It wore iron chains, lived in open captivity, and rebelled whenever it could. That kind of slavery, ugly, raw, violent, was always unstable. All it took was awareness for revolution to brew. But the most dangerous kind of slavery is not physical, it's psychological. Today's slaves aren't locked in cages, they're locked in beliefs. They don't cry for freedom because they think they already have it. They don't fight their masters because they can't even see them. And so the system doesn't need to threaten. It just needs to design. It doesn't order, it nudges. It doesn't punish, it rewards. It doesn't chain, it offers choices. You feel free because you're allowed to pick between options, but no one asks who created the options in the first place. You can vote, shop, scroll, stream, but the field you're playing on is fixed. The choices were laid out for you, like a children's menu, colorful, distracting, and always within the bounds of control. This is the modern genius of power. It doesn't look like oppression, it looks like convenience. We carry our surveillance devices in our pockets, grateful for their speed and connectivity. We trade our privacy for likes, our attention for dopamine, and our data for personalization. And in doing so, we become the product, the worker, the watcher, and the watched all in one. Because when you believe you're free, you stop questioning the walls around you. You begin to defend them. You mock those who question them. You call the system a blessing. You celebrate your obedience as choice. We are told to express ourselves within a structure. We are encouraged to chase success within a narrow path. We are given identity not through introspection, but through labels, trends, and algorithms. You can speak freely so long as you stay within the Overton window. You can protest so long as your dissent serves a market or a political narrative. You can question so long as your questions don't disrupt the order. But what happens if you want to step outside the game? What if you don't want to compete, hustle, subscribe, consume, comply? What if you want to unplug, not just from devices, but from the entire performance? Suddenly, you're no longer free. You're abnormal, you're dangerous, you're a problem. This is not freedom, it's choreography. And every move you make, your career, your vote, your posts, your lifestyle, is measured, sold, tracked, and, when needed, redirected. You are free, yes, but only in the way a rat is free to choose which side of the maze it wants to run through. And the tragedy? Many of us feel proud for running faster. True freedom begins when you recognize the game. When you ask, who built this? When you realize the real question isn't, what can I pick? But rather, can I refuse to play at all? Only then does the curtain begin to lift. Only then can you start to reclaim what's been quietly taken, your time, your focus, your mind. Because the worst kind of prison is the one you never realize you're in. And the most obedient slave is the one who smiles and thanks the system for the chains. If you strip away the noise of modern life, behind the apps and headlines and hashtags, you will find something ancient quietly operating in the background. Something that has guided empires, built religions, and maintained control for centuries. Fear. The deeper game of control today is not about brute force or physical oppression. It is not about chains or whips or jail cells. It is about steering people in subtle, predictable ways. And fear is the most reliable tool for that job. The political philosopher Machiavelli wrote centuries ago that fear is more dependable than love. Why? Because love is emotional. It can change. It can surprise. But fear follows patterns. It moves people in straight lines. And that is exactly what the system wants. Predictability. You do not need to be forced when you can be nudged. You do not need a master yelling commands when you can carry the command inside your own head. Every day, fear whispers its terms into our routines, and most of the time, we do not even notice. Do not work hard enough, you will fall behind. Do not play the game, you will be poor. Do not post, hustle, improve, you will become invisible. Do not buy insurance, you will be left unprotected. Do not develop yourself, you will be irrelevant. Do not conform, you will be excluded. We follow these paths not because someone is standing over us with a stick, but because we have absorbed the threat into our bones. We fear failure, rejection, poverty, loneliness, so we chase safety, success, acceptance, and we call it freedom. But it is not real freedom if your choices are shaped by fear. It is management, it is guidance, it is control. This is the genius of the modern system. It does not demand obedience. It rewards alignment. It does not imprison your body. It steers your behavior. You are free to choose, yes, but only from a menu someone else wrote. You are free to speak, but only within the boundaries of acceptable opinion. You are free to live your life, as long as your life supports the system. The stories we are told every day are not neutral. They carry warnings beneath their inspiration. Be your best self or risk being worthless. Work harder or risk being broke. Follow your dreams or get left behind. The message sounds empowering, but the consequence is always fear-based. There is always a subtle punishment waiting for those who do not comply. And this is how the system maintains power, not through law or violence, but through story, through narrative. Fear has been rebranded as motivation. Anxiety has been marketed as discipline. Pressure has been framed as personal growth. We tell ourselves we are chasing success, but often we are just running from fear. And when you finally pause to question it, something shifts. You start to see how fear has been sold to you, how your daily choices have been shaped not by your dreams, but by the threat of failure. How your life has been managed by a system that never needed to imprison you, because you already carry the walls inside your mind. This is the deeper game. And once you see it for what it is, the question becomes clear. What would your life look like without fear as the driver? That is where real freedom begins. Not with rebellion, not with noise, but with awareness, with clarity, with the quiet refusal to be managed by fear ever again. So now you see the game, you see the patterns, you see how fear has been used to guide your life, how stories were built not just to inspire, but to manage. The question now is simple, but sharp. What do you do? Because here's the truth Machiavelli would whisper to you if he were alive today. You cannot escape the system. It is not a building you can walk out of. It is not a government you can vote away. It is not a single villain you can defeat. The system is everywhere. It lives in banks and ads and schools. It lives in social media, in workplace culture, in the language people use to measure success and failure. It is written into the code of modern life. But that does not mean you are helpless. It means you need a different kind of strength. You cannot run from it, but you can stop being its pawn. Start by asking, who benefits from your fear? Look closely. Every fear you carry of being poor, unloved, unseen, unsuccessful feeds someone else's power. Someone sells you a product, a belief, a habit, a distraction. Every time you move out of fear, someone else collects the reward. Follow the incentive. Power is not random. It follows benefit. So when you feel pressured to conform, improve, hustle, fear, ask, who gains when I obey this voice? Then take the next step. Pull your emotions out of the story. Just for a moment, set aside the drama, the guilt, the shame, the hope, and look at the mechanism. Who wrote the rules? Who decided this is the way life should be? Who said success looks like this and failure looks like that? Because if you did not write the rules, then you are just playing someone else's game. And here's the trick of control. They do not need you to lose. They just need you to keep playing by their rules. Machiavelli would not tell you to rebel with emotion. He would not tell you to scream at the sky or burn it all down. That is predictable. That is easy to contain. He would tell you to observe, to understand, to become sharp. He would tell you, if you wish to stop being ruled, learn how the rulers think. If you wish to stop being manipulated, study the levers they pull. And if you want your power back, stop fighting the enemies they gave you. Because no one controls you if you refuse to play the role they wrote for you. The power is not in noise, it is in clarity. They tell you what to fear, what to chase, what to become. But you do not have to accept the script. You can step off the stage. You can rewrite your part. You do not win by screaming louder. You win by seeing clearer. This is not about rebellion, it is about sovereignty. Because real freedom is not about choosing from the menu. It is about seeing who printed the menu and deciding if you even want to order. And so we arrive at the cold, sharp truth. Freedom without awareness is obedience in disguise. You are not free just because you choose. You are free when you understand the game and no longer play it blindly.